before I proceed, can I just make sure, can you hear online? If you could indicate, that would be helpful. And Jamie's watching to see. So thank you, Scott. That was what we were waiting for. The agenda and pack for today's meeting has been published on ModGov and can be directly accessed through the council's website. When I invite people to speak, if they could be helpful, if they would state their name so that we can make reference specifically to any pages that they're all talking to in the agenda pack so that we can all keep up. For housekeeping, there are no expected fire alarms, but should this happen, please follow democratic services out of the room. Thank you. I think that's everything covered. So agenda item 1 of our agenda is apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, committee. We have received apologies for absence from Councillor O'Donnell, from Councillor Hunt, from Councillor Carswell, and from Councillor Hadley, for whom Councillor Rodriguez is substituting. Councillor Snell is online. We've also received apologies from one of our co-opted members, Sławek Nowakiewicz.
Thank you. Just double check. It says just Jenny is a member online at the moment. Thank you. Okay. Any other apologies or substitutions? So to gain access to the Wi-Fi, you need to go, if you're going through Smart Guest, you can go through the process there and it'll email you or text you your password. Apparently there are some issues, and Martin Lovell says that there are traffic. He's been diverted through Bridgewater. It's very slow. Those of us from Bridgewater will know that Bridgewater is usually very slow going through at the moment. So he's on his way for that. Okay, we are quorate, so we can proceed. So we go on to item 2 of our agenda, which is minutes from the meeting held on the 29th of June to approve them as a true record of the meeting. They have been circulated. Any points or comments, members? Are we happy that we accept them? Thank you very much. It's easy. I'll sign those at the appropriate moment. Move that over there. So item 3 of our agenda is declarations of interest. Members are asked to make any declarations that are relevant to today's agenda items that aren't already disclosed in their online record of interest. No, that's fine. Moving on then. Agenda item 4, public question time. I'm not aware of any. No, so none received. So we move on then to agenda item 5, which is our outcome tracker. That was also been circulated, members, and it's there in your packs. Where obviously since the last meeting, there are a number of action points that have been added to it, which we are there. But are there any points or comments in relation to that? I know that we're going to look at our forward plan. So the agenda for the next meeting will be at the end when we cover that point. Jamie.
Thank you, Chair. Just as a reminder, the items that are currently in green on the outcome tracker will disappear for the next meeting. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members, thank you. Okay, we move on to item 6 of our agenda, which is the draft ILACS action plan. Who's introducing that? Heather? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very brief introduction from me, pretty much just focusing you on what's in the report, and I'll hand over to Jane. Just wanted to remind everybody, obviously between 20th of April and the 1st of May of this year, we had our 2-week officer inspection known as an ILACS. That's Inspecting Local Authority Children's Services. The inspection was graded. We were only the second one in the country to have had this new framework. We were graded under 4 practice judgments, and the outcome, as reported in the report, is that for the impact of leaders on social work practice with children and families, we required improvement to be good. The experiences and progress of children who need help and protection requires improvement to be good. The experiences and progress of children in care requires improvement to be good. And the experiences and progress of care leavers was rated as good. So obviously after any inspection we're obliged to bring an action plan to Ofsted in September. This time it's in September 26 to address the recommendations. And so of course on your papers you'll see the ask of you today is to receive the paper and the accompanying presentation, which Jane will lead on. and containing areas of action in response to the recommendations contained in the report. And again, to ask any questions to gain assurance prior to the final report. What you see before you will be a draft today, but the final report before we submit it to Ofsted. So just wanted to lay that little bit of context out and then pass over to Jane. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Heather, and thank you, Chair. Jane Shelbourne-Barrow, Service Director for Children and Families. So you will see the report I sent out, that had some very high level detail on it, but not the detailed action plan. I think it's important to say at this point that until that is submitted to Ofsted and signed off, we won't be in a position to share that copy publicly. So that's why at this stage I had those headlines on. What I'm proposing to do today is to take you through each of the recommendations, to explain what we're trying to do, what we're trying to achieve for children through that recommendation, and to explain how we're going to do it and how we're going to be monitoring that, measuring it, and giving you assurance along with the improvement board that we will have as a result of our Ofsted judgment and the other work that we're doing. So if I just share my screen. And through. Okay, so the important thing to say is that this action plan forms part of our children's social care action plan. It's an entirety. It's one part of it alongside all the transformation work that we're doing via both the Families First partnership that you heard about last time, and we're bringing regular updates around that. So that's the 4 pillars around information sharing, the multi-agency child protection teams, the family help and family group decision making. So that's a key part of the service plan along with this Ofsted plan, and some of the Ofsted recommendations and actions are part of that work. And then the other transformation work are the Wave 1 business cases that you've seen previously, which links with fostering, the room to grow, reunification and homes and horizons, and also the Wave 2 business case that's next on the agenda today. So if you think of the work that we're trying to do in children's social care as being all those things together as one, that helps really to put the Ofsted action plan into some context. What I also wanted to explain, because when it was shown last time, there was a bit of confusion around it, is that the Ofsted recommendations are set out under the Children's Social Care National Framework, which is based on 6 principles, 4 key outcomes, and also some enablers. And again, when you see these written down, you'll see when we bring things to scrutiny and we talk about how we're working with children and families in Somerset, these things are key to us and things that we're already working on and making sure that we're trying to achieve. So it's around the children's voice being central. We want families to stay together where it's safe and appropriate to do so. We want to make sure they're not just safe in their homes, but out in communities. Always thinking about that family network. If we can keep children in their families supported by those networks, it's good. We want the children in our care and our care leavers to have those stable, loving homes, and multi-agency work is key. And if we think of that transformation work, particularly in Families First, that's all around that partnership working together. So that's the principles that Children's Social Care National Framework is based on. And when they came in to do the Ofsted inspection, that's what they were looking at. Then thinking of those 4 key outcomes, which again kind of repeat some of above, they set it out as outcomes about staying together, being safe, networks and homes. And then if you remember, one of the recommendations we had was listed under an enabler around leaders, and they list 3 enablers within the framework that they're looking at. So multi-agency work, leaders driving the conditions for effective practice, and the workforce being equipped and effective. So when we go through the action plan, it's got whether there's an outcome or enabler at the top, and you will see that we didn't have recommendations in all areas, so we'll be focusing on the ones that we did. Okay, so I've set it out like this, which when you see the detailed action plan when it's published, I've kind of turned it round and started on the left-hand side with about what will success look like, because this is about what are we trying to achieve for children. We do actions because we want to make lives better for them and to achieve the very best we can. So going through the recommendations, so the first recommendation was around ensuring that our practitioners have workloads that enable them to be effective in their work for children and families. And there's two key areas really to this. One is around the staff work itself, and the other is around how that transformation work helps those workloads to be more manageable and more effective. So thinking about what will success look like with regards to our staff. So we always say our staff is the greatest resource we have. We want our staff to feel supported, to be equipped. We know that the workloads for staff are not at the level we want them to be, and we've talked about that here previously, and we're doing a lot of work to try and do it. We want them to have workloads. We don't want them to have to go off work because they're unwell or stressed. We want to make sure that when staff go home, they can say, I feel like I've done a really good job today. I'm achieving for children, and we want to help them with that. We know that if we get workloads right for staff, the issues around assessment timeliness, things about the numbers of children coming into care and the numbers of children going home from care will be impacted. We want staff to be able to do the meaningful work that they train to do and want to do. So the activity, and you saw a paper around this in a previous meeting, was around that fixed term increase in capacity to settle the system to then enable the transformation work to happen. So if you can remember, we've listed a number of posts where we have the highest pressure to actually say, if we put this temporary resource in to bring workloads down, to then enable us to do that longer work, transformation work. So how are we going to measure this and what you'll see? So when you see a little blue thing on here, what this means is behind the action plan, there will be a number of live documents, because we know we've already got a lot of tracking of milestones, KPIs. So they're going to sit behind it. So anytime we're monitoring it and bringing it to you, we can click on that and find that detailed information. So behind this work plan, there's a list of every single post that we're trying to recruit to, when the adverts went out, the inquiries received, interview dates, offer letters, start letters. So we can really track that. And I know a previous concern raised here was, are we going to be successful? Are we going to be able to recruit? We know it's really tough, both in Somerset, regionally and nationally, to recruit skilled workers. So all the time we're thinking, what's our plan B? What posts do we need to look at? But we're starting to track through. There's lots of adverts out. There are interviews happening. So we'll work that through. What we'll also be looking at is that workload data. And I know Councillor Nicholson asked the question around, well, what caseload numbers are we looking for? And again, sat behind this, for each team, there will be the caseload number we are trying to get to. And there will be where we are now as the baseline, and then there'll be that month on month tracking through. But for different teams, it is a slightly different number. There's still a range it falls between, sort of 14 to 20, but that is slightly different. But we will be tracking that. We believe it will take a number of months for us to get to where we want to be, but we will be looking at that as we go through. We'll clearly be monitoring the staff sickness data, and again, we get that monthly snapshot of that, and we can look at that. And then there's the staff health and wellbeing survey that's carried out in the council. So that's the first part of that workloads recommendation. Moving on to the second one, it's around the transformation work that I've already mentioned, linked with Families First and the business case you're going to hear about shortly. And this is really about making sure that children's needs are assessed in a timely way. That doesn't mean to say we're not doing that assessment work, but this is about how can we be more effective? How can we do those shorter timescale assessments and get children and families into that right bit of the service, receiving the support they need? How can we make sure even when we're doing those assessments, that's an intervention in itself, and we're having an impact on that child's life? So we know there'll be a real focus around families being involved very early on in planning. That's the whole purpose of those family group decision-making meetings. What is it that your family network have got to support this child? Let's keep children in their networks if we can do. We believe it will mean fewer children requiring those child protection plans because we're intervening earlier, therefore impacting on numbers of children coming into care. And also being able to get more children going home through that reunification work. And also ensuring through the sufficiency work that we'll go on to in a moment that more children will be living in foster homes rather in that residential provision. So the transformation is huge, I'm going to say, and we've broken it down into the various programmes. And again, behind each of those bits of transformation work, there's a whole list of KPIs, milestones, and they are tracked through. There's a monthly meeting around the My World, My Tomorrow, which takes in the wave one business cases. And there are also lots of reported mechanisms around family first. So we have all that information and it's updated regularly. It's about pulling that through to show that in this action plan. So that's recommendation 1. Are people wanting me to pause or carry on? Is there anything? No? Okay. Okay, so the next recommendation was around improving the arrangements to identify, track and respond to children missing education. And if you can remember from the presentation I did last time, there was an issue here about the data that was submitted, bit of an own goal for us there. So some of these actions are to do with the making sure that process is right around the collation of data, what we see, what we know about children, how quickly we are notified about a child being out of school, and there is an expectation there. It will be there very quickly to us. But more importantly, in the bits that we're just fleshing out to go into the actions is so what? If a child is missing education, what collectively are we doing about that? Because we know children being in school full time is where they need to be, and actually is a protective factor. So whilst the action around this is giving ourselves assurance that we do have that data, schools are telling us, and it's going to the right panel for tracking and discussion, the actions that need to be added to this is so what? Have we got all the right mechanisms in place to actually change that for that child and get them back into an education setting? Okay, so the next recommendation is around staff receiving timely management oversight, guidance and direction to support timely and well-matched actions and support that matches their needs and risks. So it's a very long sentence that, and I know someone asked about it, it's very confusing. They are the exact wordings of the Ofsted recommendation. But breaking that down, what we're saying is staff should receive both regular calendared in supervision, which they do, where they will look at children's records and discuss that work in detail. That's the supervision that needs to happen, but also it's about that really regular management oversight, checking out things, those discussions that happen when a risk or a need changes for a child, and making sure that's really evident on that child's file that discussions happened, but that staff member is then supported to take those actions against whatever that change might be. So that success there is we want to make sure that children's needs are being assessed, and as their needs change, we're responding to that and changing what we're doing and making sure they've got that right intervention. We need to make sure that those records show that. And what we know is from some what Ofsted told us during the week is when they talk to staff are really able to talk about that child and have a fantastic understanding of their needs and risks, but then that's not always seen, written down. And so it's really important that that's on there. There's all this great work happening, but it needs to be there and shown to all. And we need to make sure that that supervision is there for every child at the right point according to our practice standards. So the activity that's going to happen, there's going to be 3 face-to-face continual professional development sessions in each of our geographical areas, 3 times a year, and then repeat. And that is all about what's good management oversight, what's good supervision. It's something that we have done, but it's about reminding it and that drip feed of information, giving good practice examples to people, showing them what good looks like, and just having that opportunity to talk that through. We then expect our operations managers to actually be bringing the quarterly performance review meeting that's chaired by Claire, the DCS, actually operations managers to be coming to that saying, I can confirm that in my area, this many percentage of supervisions are happening, and what's the quality of that supervision like? What does it mean for children? So that's that activity that we'll be undertaking. And there's also that move to that earlier assessment, which might seem an odd action to put in there. But what we know is at the moment, social workers can have up to 45 days to do an assessment. Not all assessments need 45 days. But what happens when you're really busy is all of them stretch to 45 days. So let's be really focused on what's the presenting needs for this child. Let's assess it and let's move it to where it needs to be to allow that work to happen. So that's the activity that's going to happen and how that's going to be measured. We do regular dip reviews, which is quick dips into files to say, can we see what we should be seeing? We do full practice evaluations, where we will actually sit down and go through that child's record with that worker. We speak to the child, we speak to the family to say, what's it been like working with us? So we're looking to see that quality of those conversations and that evidence of that management oversight and supervision. Okay, so the next recommendation is around improve the understanding of thresholds, identification and timely multi-agency decision making through a strategy discussion when the threshold for the risk of significant harm about a child is met. And again, if you can remember, we had some interesting discussion with Ofsted around where they thought strategy discussions should have happened. We had a different view. We had an interesting debate around that. So this recommendation is really about us gaining assurance that firstly, strategy discussions are happening when we believe they are, and they're of good quality, but also that we're helping partners to understand that when we are choosing for a strategy discussion not to happen, why that is, but how we can still work together as a partnership. So thinking of health and police, and we've got some really good examples where we may have been asked to bring a child into care who might be 15 because of things happening in their community. We don't believe it's in the best interest to bring that child into care, but we do believe it's in that child's best interest to have some police involvement around what's happening in that street, in that community, what disruption work is happening to enable that child to be safe, rather than them having to move out of their home, their community, because of things that are happening out there. So it's about actually saying to the multi-agency partners, if it's not a risk of immediate harm, what is it that we can do together to get the best outcomes for these children? So again, there's going to be a lot of sort of training work with our staff, but also with those multi-agency partners around that proportionate intervention approach, and always thinking about actually what's right for children. Because what we know is once we bring children into care or remove them from their network, actually putting that back again can be really, really difficult. And it needs to be right for that child to do that. So that's some of the activity that we're going to see as a result of the work that we're doing in Families First, in that change to multi-agency child protection teams and family help. There will be a review of the effective support document that all agencies use to look at, this is the presented needs of the child, what does that mean, what do I need to be doing, but we'll be working with partners on that to make sure that that language and that understanding is there. So again, we'll be using those DIP reviews and practice evaluations to see what difference this is making. Also, team diagnostics are on there. So that's when we send a team of us in to a team for a day and look at all their work, interview staff, ask questions, and to see how that work's doing and how they're doing in working with children. And then we give them feedback, they get an action plan. So it's a bit like a mini Ofsted, but with peers really. And that helps our staff as well to get those skills at doing that peer work and peer review. Okay, so the next recommendation is around how we improve the effectiveness of the response to children who experience neglectful parenting and the public law outline. So that's that legal framework that we put in place when we're concerned for a child to ensure that decision making is timely and based on full information. So again, what do we want to see in this? We want to make sure children are receiving the right service, and if their needs are that they need to be escalated, and we need to be working with parents in that legal framework around their care for children, we need to make sure that's happening. If that piece of work is finished and those parents can be stepped down from that, then we need to make sure that's happening as well. And we need to make sure that children experiencing neglect, that can be identified at the earliest possible opportunity, so that early help can be put in place prior to them needing a more statutory intervention. So the kind of activity that's happening, we have recently finished putting together a legal tracker to help us look at all that work across the system. So that's it's live, it's happening. That needs to be fully embedded across all areas in the county to make sure we've got that good oversight of all those legal cases. Operations managers will be responsible for that, and they will feed back to senior managers around how that's going, and through that we'll be able to pick up on if there's unnecessary delay maybe in the courts and how we can work with some of that. So we should have a really good understanding of where's this at. Children should be, if they're in the court arena, we should be finishing within 26 weeks. That's that national guidance around that. we're not, that's not happening in this court at the moment. Sometimes it's way beyond that, and we need to work with the court and other people to bring that back in line and to make sure that we're getting outcomes and decisions for children quickly. 26 weeks is half a year for a child. That's a long time to be waiting to know where you're permanently going to be or live. And there's going to be further training for that multi-agency partnership around that strengths and needs toolkit, which is around identifying neglect and intervening early. Okay, so moving on then to the recommendation about improving the assessment of children who are 16 or 17 who are being considered for support and accommodation to ensure their needs are met. And this is Ofsted's view that we had a small number of 16 or 17-year-olds that we had moved from a care provision, a residential home, into that supported semi-independent. There's a question around, and we should always be asking, are there care needs or support needs? So in order to make sure that we are getting that right all of the time, we've developed a standalone assessment for those 16 and 17-year-olds that compares that care versus support. This is always quite a tricky one. We often have 16 and 17-year-olds telling us they want to go into semi-independent, and they are sometimes voting with their feet from their care provision, but it's about working with them around what's right for them and how do we help them move on to adult life as well. Improving support to care leavers over 21 in custody. Again, if you remember, this related to 3 of our care leavers over 21 who were in custody, all of whom had requested to be closed to our service. What we have said is, as a result of that, or whilst we still need to listen to that young person's voice, they do have a choice whether they want to engage. We feel we can review that offer to them about how often we still reach out to them, particularly working with the Youth Justice Service, thinking of resettlement and how we can make sure that they do know we are there should they want our support. So there's been a review of that offer there, and we will evidence that by looking at their records if they are in custody and how we're working with them and communicating with them. Okay, so the last sort of big area of the recommendations was around improving the commissioning sufficiency and variety of homes to enable children to live in stable, loving homes and prevent the placement of children in care in inappropriate and/or unlawful registered children's homes. Again, a very wordy recommendation. So what was success look like? We know we want less children coming into care, more children living in family-based settings, whether it's their family, family network, or fostering, if that's not possible. We want children that are in homes that meet their needs. We know we have too many children in residential homes at the moment. We know that, hence all the work that we're doing around sufficiency, some of which you're going to hear about in the next agenda item. We know we don't want children to move around homes either. It's a breakdown. We need to look at that stability and how we support, and we want children to go home when it is safe to do so. So the main activity on this slide is around those business cases in the wave 1, where we've it's all the step forward work with fostering and kinship, the reunification work, and the room to grow. All that is currently being tracked, and we're seeing progress in those areas. And then there's the CLA transformation work that's happening through the My World, My Tomorrow, which we're going to go on to. We have started those test and learns. We've got a team in both the Children Looked After team, starting to scope that work with Newton and also in fostering. So that work has commenced, and you'll see in the business case for it soon. So we've got all those milestones put in of how we're going to track that and look at that. And I'm going to say, look for and watch the improvements happen. Okay, what we also know is that we need to continue to drive to try and recruit more foster carers. We have just in the last week or so launched or started to launch the council-wide fostering campaign aimed at staff and their networks, people that they know. And we've also had a meeting with both police and health where they have both indicated they like our support to launch similar campaigns in their agencies. So this is about helping staff to understand there are a number of different ways to foster. It's not all about long-term, full-time foster carers. We need lots of different types of fostering arrangements, whether that's short breaks, emergency, breaks for children with disabilities, short-term. So it's about saying, actually, for some staff, it might be something they are interested in, and as a fostering friendly employer, how we can support them to do that. And my challenge to staff is, if it's not right for you, you will know someone who it is. How can you help? So there's a big drive around that. And again, we're tracking all that around inquiries, how many we progress as we go through that. There's some work happening in what's called our home team and regionally, which I'll explain. But if there's any questions, Henrietta sat next to me, I'm sure will be far better to be able to explain it. But what we know is we often end up with having to do searches for a new homes for children in an emergency way. We do get emergencies come in. That's because something has happened, or a provider, a home may give immediate notice on a child. They can give immediate notice if it's a safeguarding concern. So we end up having to search in an emergency way. Sometimes that means that because of sufficiency or the speed we're having to do it, we may not get that best match for that child, which then can sort of create more issues as we go along. So there's some work going on in the home team. Will be around what does that look like? How do we look at the resource we've got in the home team that are looking at that longer term planning and the emergency work to try and make that more effective. There's also a lot of regional work going on, because we know that we want children to be in Somerset, or certainly local to Somerset. Everyone else in the region wants that. How can we as a region come together and actually set out our stall to the market and get good engagement with the market, so that we don't have providers saying, well, Jane, if you don't want this bed, an authority down the road will have it because they'll pay me £2,000 more or something. So actually, how do we work together to say, if we keep our children here, outcomes will be better for them, and it's easier to work together on something than feel like we're in competition. We know that we want to get children home, and we need to make sure that we are working with children as soon as they come into care to think about, what does permanence look like for this child? We may be early on in the court proceeding. We may not fully understand what the outcome might be, but what do we think by what we know, and how can we best plan and track every single child that comes into our care? So at the moment, we track children that are in our care, that are staying in our care for a period of time. So we're going to move that tracking activity to be every child that comes in, so that they are being looked at regularly to say what's changed, what's happening, what do we need to do. We also think that will mean, if we're focusing in that way, that maybe some of that, there won't be so many breakdowns early on in that child's time with us, because we'll be looking at that and thinking about what support do we put in, what did we learn here, so that it doesn't happen again. And then I think this is the last one, if you're starting to get fed up with my voice, a real focus on making sure that we don't have children in unregistered provision. We do not want that. We only ever do it in those emergency situations where there is nowhere for that child to sleep. That's really important that we understand that. It is not a placement of choice, a home of choice. It is that real need for something. What we also know is we do have some children's homes in the portfolio, and we are working with providers around what sort of homes do we need for our children. Now, what we know is children often spend time in unregistered provision for a very short period of time whilst we're assessing their needs and making a plan. So we're really interested to look at the idea of assessment homes, those short-term homes where we've got them in a registered provision, doing that assessment and then making the appropriate plan. We also know that we need the right type of homes that will also support both stability, if they're going to be in our care for a while, but also the opportunity to link with family. And that whole purpose of that home, or where that child is living, is to get them back with family. So it really can review, this activity is about reviewing what we've got and how we work with that market to think about the different needs of children. So that's the sort of whistle-stop tour of the Ofsted recommendations and what we're proposing to do.
Thank you. Before members, if you want to indicate questions, my vice chair will be noting them while I just fill a bit of time. Jane, thank you. The journey from the original conversation we had that you brought to committee to now, I had a number of questions to cover, and I've been ticking them off as you've been going down through, covering the points. I think just in this conversation, for me personally, the assurance is there that we're doing. I know that we would, but the fact that you've demonstrated it and you articulated it in such a way that I honestly, I've been crossing questions off as we go down. So thank you for that. There's obviously been a tremendous amount of work. So on my behalf, in the first instance, thank you. And if you want to let your team know that that's the case, because I know there's like you said, the indications are there. For me, one of the points that I think is really exciting is the fact that fostering where our staff are becoming more aware of it, and that some of our partners have said, actually, come and have that conversation with us. That cannot fail to be. But even if you have one extra out of all that, then it's worth it. And I think so. So there. Okay, that's my waffling. The members, I've got some questions, but members, obviously bear in mind that we're not. The operational side of the implementation is the part of the service. We're looking at the strategic level here. And please, as you go through your questions, if you can remember, if you think there's a recommendation that's needed, say it on the way through, rather than me have to try and figure out at the end what you want us to recommend. Otherwise, thank you. So members, I'll indicate it and we'll do it. So first up is Peter Clayton. Peter.
Hi. Yes, thank you. It's sort of strategic. It's quite a detailed plan and a lot of work's gone into it already. So thank you for all the work you are putting in. But who's actually going to be responsible at a strategic level for the plan in each of these areas that we've seen today? And you've mentioned possibly, I think you said it comes back to scrutiny. So we as members can have oversight going into the future. Is that the case? It will come back to scrutiny. Yeah, so it's.
I was not wanting to sound too flippant about it, but I mean, ultimately, the accountability would rest with myself and with Claire. In terms, statutorily, we are responsible for all of the delivery of the services here. But it's a good question, though, around and for the detail about who is going to be keeping an eye on it from a governance perspective. I mean, it is our gig. I don't think I'm wrong in saying that. It's mine and Claire's. But definitely, one of the things that I'm interested in seeing, and it's already developing, is there were some comments in the Ofsted response, the reports, of course. And I remember you asked the question, we couldn't quite answer it, was when they say there's an issue with leadership, what leadership is that? Is that political leadership? Is it director leadership? Is it service manager leadership? And one of the things that I'm going to be working with, I know they're working on already, but I want to make sure that we see is that accountability and that managerial oversight, that supervisory oversight is right at every level. The other thing I'll leave to Jane to say where we might bring it back to, but I'm sure we'd be happy to bring back things to scrutiny. It'd be an obvious place for you to keep our feet to the flame. But I think you're right. The accountability has to be at all of those levels, not just top one, because we need to. I mean, yeah, we need to be sure that the setup is correct.
Could I just add a bit to that? So one of the points that I wanted to be, the action plan is got all the columns there, but who is responsible for each of those action points? So from a scrutiny perspective, who are we holding to account? So is there a column missing there?
Yes, Chair, there is. I was trying to not put too many on the slide, but yes, so every single action has got a lead. They generally sit with the head of service level. Or myself for that oversight. So when we go to the improvement board and we're reporting on it, that's where that reporting will come from. But every single action has got a lead officer, or some of them have 2 or 3 lead officers, but they're all at service director or head of service level.
Thank you. Alistair?
Thank you, Chair. I had a conversation in here about 4 or 5 months ago, myself and Councillor Heather Shearer, about something similar to do with ages. And you had on the screen, and I quote, the age 16, 17 being for children. Well, let's just bear in mind that when the person who's 17 gets to their 18th birthday, they could get married, they can get drink in a pub, they can go for an apprenticeship, something like that on a building site, albeit, and go and work in a pub. At what point do we actually say, well, look, it's not the council's responsibility to spend this amount of money to look after this person, because this person is old enough to walk into the big wide free world and go for themselves. You also mentioned the age, and I think I'm right in saying this, but I heard you, the age of either 26, 24, 26 for the age range. Was that right, Heather?
There are lots of different reasons where there are lots of different times at which our responsibilities stop for some of the children who are either in our care or have been in our care, or indeed, for instance, children with education healthcare plans. Sometimes it stops into your 25th birthday rather
Right.
than being at say 18. So I think there's lots of different positions. It's not, it isn't, they don't just fall out of our hands at 18, all of them uniformly. Some children obviously we keep for a lot longer and should keep for a lot longer.
Well, in the presence of reality and costs for the council, etc., even 18, to be honest with you, I think is a bit on the high side, but it's not for me to say anything. I'm only talking to you just in a conversation. So at what point then do you actually say that's a cut off, you're okay, go and fend for yourself because we can't afford to keep you anymore and you're old enough to go out in the big world?
Okay, so children that are in our care have to be in Ofsted registered provision up to the age of 18. So whether that's a care provision or supported accommodation, which is what is aiding them to lead on to adult, it's still Ofsted registered now. So that process and cost is all linked with that. Wherever possible, we want to make sure that children move into supported accommodation if their needs are at that level, because we're trying to help them on their pathway into adulthood, as we would if there are children living in our home and we're helping them learn how to cook, clean and do budget and all those sorts of things. For some children, though, they will have care needs beyond 18 and will transition into adult social care. For children, once they hit 18, if they are not in they will no longer be in Ofsted registered accommodation paid for by Children's. If they don't meet the adult threshold, we do have the Thrive contract around supported accommodation, which has both social care beds for care leavers and also beds for young people who are homeless under housing. And that runs through to up to the age of 24, 25. But the reason for that difference at 18 is because children in our care have to be in registered provision, and they are entitled to a social worker and receive that statutory intervention.
Can I come back one more time? Just quickly, can I come back?
Just looking at the relevance to where we are, that's all, because obviously there's the bigger picture, Alistair.
All right, okay.
Thank you. Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to decide whether I'm being strategic or too operational. Two things I wanted to ask about. One is about the children that we don't know about. Absolutely, it's about making sure that we've got proper relationship with schools, that we know about children who are falling out of school, that children don't, first of all, don't get off-rolled. Secondly, don't take themselves away without us being involved. But there is a set of children who've never come into school, and we really don't know enough about them. It's very difficult to know about the children who've never come to school, particularly if they were not born here but have moved into the county, because we won't know about them at Rising 5 when they apply for school. And these are among the more, most of them will be absolutely fine, but they are in a very vulnerable place because very few people really can know about them. And I wonder whether we have any way that we can know more about them, or any further ideas about knowing more about them, birth data, etc. But it's the ones also the ones who move in. So that's one question. Do you want the other one now or in a minute?
The first one is about the crystal ball, the unknown unknowns, isn't it?
So, yeah, as we say, it is the unknown unknown. The work we're doing, though, in thinking about the way we can move to that more locality working, thinking about all that work around family hubs and how we work with public health nursing, it is about trying to understand and trying to help people in communities also help each other and make some of that identification so that we do know some of these things. But it's a really difficult one, isn't it? Because we can only respond to what we do know, and we are therefore, if not reliant on others, drawing that attention. But by being more visual, by thinking about that way we work in communities across the council, different services in the council who may see a family and see a child at home in the day, it's about how we can get people to say, actually, that doesn't feel quite right. Should I ask a question, or should I be letting someone know? So it's kind of thinking about that drive, really.
Thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely, about the whole council approach, everybody being involved. That's really helpful. The second question was around the vexed subject of neglect. it's been an area of work that we've, there've been lots of reviews, there've lots of cases over the years. How is it going to be different this time? Because we've spent years trying to make sure we identify and act on neglect when we should, and it's always come up to now has seemed to come back to us. What is going to be different?
So I think some of it won't be, because some of it is repeating and running through training, thinking of churning staff. However, the work that we want to do around chronologies, which is about where we call every time something comes in or we're made informed, getting people to review chronologies. So if a family comes to our attention again and we look back and say, well, 2 years ago we had this, 3 years ago, and actually making people think differently about that and saying, well, there's a reason for that. Let's not just do the same again. Let's think about there's a pattern of incidents or a pattern of behaviour. We need to think differently. So the training this time is really focusing on that, because sometimes they just come to our attention and enough's done that it goes away from us. But actually, if that's the second or third or fourth occurrence of that, that suggests that's not actually improving for that child and family, and we need to do something differently. It sort of answers it, but it's trying to get people to think differently around it.
As we're doing the education one there, so one of the questions that the two questions that I had around children missing education, I think follows on from what Francis was saying. So with the Power BI reporting system, when will that be operational? And secondly, when it comes to children and missing education, so what will trigger escalations if schools are not reporting accurately?
So the Power BI report itself is not difficult to put in place, but there's little point in having a Power BI report until we've actually got the quality and the accuracy of the data coming into the system right. So there are two issues really. Some schools are not reporting accurately on children who are not in education, and the other issue is that the current system we use does not interpret that information coming into the system accurately all the time. And the Power BI report pulls from the system, which pulls from the school input. So there's some work going on currently to try and correct the interpretation of that data in the system that we collect the data in. And there's work with schools to make sure that schools are accurately reporting that data. So the framework of that Power BI report is practically ready. It could be rolled out tomorrow, but it wouldn't be a very effective report because we know that the data that's coming into it is not completely accurate at the moment. So I think we're aiming for that by October. So we're looking at another 2 months to be able to put that, to get that right, using September when schools go back, to make sure we've got the right data input from schools, and currently doing the work on the sort of case, the management recording system, to try and make sure that is accurate in terms of its interpretation.
Thank you. So just preempting a recommendation then going forward. So one of the things that perhaps the committee may be interested in is understanding, Jane talked about all of these things sitting behind, but obviously there'll be a required by. So is there going to be like a RAG rating attached to these, and how will that be monitored? So to use that as an example, what you're saying is there are some things we need to put in place with schools to guarantee, to make sure that the data that we're getting is accurate before we can then start putting the monitoring system in place to keep an eye on it. So will the RAG rating be sitting behind, and who will be looking at the RAG rating for those sorts of targets?
So the whole of the action plan will be monitored through a subgroup of the Transformation Board, which will be chaired by Edwina Grant, who's an ex-DCS. And so we will know what the progress is on that plan through that process. The plan, the detailed plan, is in final draft at the moment. It's going to that board this week for final sort of review, if you like, following scrutiny today. And then it will be submitted to Ofsted, who could come back and say they want it to look slightly different. But we will continue with those actions that we've already got in place during this process, because we believe they're the right actions, which we could amend if required to by any of the groups that are going to look at it subsequent to today.
Thank you. Ruth.
Try this one, see if this one works. Okay. A few things from me, Chair. So, mine was a bit about the same as yours with the school data. Obviously, the local authority can, to a certain extent, control local authority schools. We get into a whole nother world when we start talking about academies. So have we got any other mechanisms in place for our voluntary and community sector, or through self-declarations from families when children are not in school and it's not being reported back to the local authority? So that'd be one of my questions. You've nicked most of mine around RAG ratings, and that's fine. I just wanted to check that there are timescales for deliverables, and it would be without, remiss of me if I don't ask the question about quality assurance and children's voice within this.
If I pick up the quality assurance and children's voice, so yes, there are timescales on the detailed action plan for every single action, and then we can RAG rate each bit of the action against that. And yes, children's voice. So in all the work in every opportunity that we can, various bits, whether that's through practice evaluations, feedback when we finish working with them, we will always look to make sure that child's voice is coming through.
I can answer a bit about education. So this is a process-driven exercise. It's not really an opinion or views-based exercise in terms of we have to have a record statutorily of children who are missing education. The way that has always happened and happens in every other local authority is through using this tracker and to identify from schools data which children are missing education. Parents can obviously very happy for parents to tell us if children are missing education and they believe that their school has not recorded it. That would be very helpful. But it's difficult to put a system in for that because the system is largely based on school data and coding, which is government coding that we have to use for schools to identify the different sort of levels or types of non-attendance in school. Yeah.
Thank you. Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was, as I said, very strategic. And I mean, I've been sat on this committee for 4 years now, and every time I see it, thinking I'm sure I could listen to it again and again. I'm not quite getting my head around it all, but I was interested in what you said about staff being our greatest resource right at the beginning. And again, apologies if I get too operational, not strategic, but I suppose it is strategic. And of course, every business in the world would say staff are the greatest resource. But I suppose the difference is if something goes wrong at Wetherspoon, somebody might have a steak and chips that isn't quite so nice. Where something goes wrong here, it's a little bit, the outcome might be more serious. And then when you were talking about the supervision and I'm trying to think where it was now, the supervision and the dipping in, then actually, of course, how do you stop that subjectiveness? Because how do you stop the disagreements? Because as you said yourself, you sort of had an interesting discussion with Ofsted about what they were saying. Well, surely that happens from staff and who's supervising them, and where do you get to the point where I'm right, you're wrong? Because obviously there is no size fits all. So that's what I was really struggling with. And of course, then you talk about sickness and staff sickness. Well, of course, if a planner goes sick for a few months, well, the worst comes to worst, somebody wastes the planning application a little bit longer. But then when you talk about that 45-day assessment time, and then you talk about the 26 weeks, well, actually 45 days is 6 weeks, is it? He says 5 weeks. 5 weeks. So that's suddenly a fifth of that. So it's and then later on we talked about accountability. I don't know whether it's yourself, Chair, actually, who's accountable. But actually, I then thought, well, what is accountability now? At what point does the senior management step in because things aren't going as they should do, and how does that occur? And are we capable of doing it in a proper way? I think it's just one of those. It's just I know it was the first part you talked about, but then and the other thing was I mean, the fostering side of things. I mean, we talk about that. I mean, we've been talking about that again for years and years and years. And I remember mentioning it at parish councils, when we were having a drive a few years back. And but how do we win hearts and minds, because obviously with fostering might be a couple of things. Somebody might have come home and started talking about fostering the other day, and I just spat my dinner out almost. But that's on a personal level. But how do we win the hearts and minds of the people to make it realise how good and a beneficial thing it can be, not only for themselves, but not only for the child, but for themselves? Because there must be loads of people out there who are actually capable of it, never really thought about it. And I know you're working through this, you're working through the staff, working through the staff, and do they know anyone? But there's not, although we're a very big employer, there's an awful lot of people out there out of a certain age with maybe empty bedrooms, maybe not working as hard as they used to do, who could potentially help, especially when you talked about that emergency side of things. I thought that was quite interesting, because I think people might not want to necessarily foster the long term, but might be able to do a few days while, as you say, you don't want someone sleeping on the street. So, and how much effort and how much money maybe can we throw at getting that message across? I think that's my questions.
There's a couple of points to kind of clarify on that, which I think will hopefully answer your question. So the first one around the 45 days and 26 weeks, that's two different parts of the system. So an assessment will be done to ascertain what needs to happen. 26 weeks relates to if we're in that sort of legal framework with families. So that would be following an assessment, or they would skip that bit of the assessment if it was an emergency and we were going straight into a legal framework. The second one around accountability, yes, every social worker does have a line manager. There are also senior sort of practitioners within the team, peer support, team meetings. We have a scheme of delegation around what needs to be escalated and when. We have consultant social workers that support social workers. We have a principal social worker. So we have a number of different ways of reaching out to staff. Yes, we invite challenge and debate around situations. There's often not always one complete answer, and it does need that teasing out and working through. But yes, at the end of the day, if we need it to be escalated, and for myself or Claire to step in around decision making, that will happen and does happen regularly. So we do our best to reach out to staff in a variety of ways. Your last comment about fostering being everyone's business. Yes, we do need to reach out. Certainly one of the things we're hoping to do is put in a council-wide sort of project team with someone from HR, someone from economic development, thinking about all the different ways that we can use those campaign materials and reach out to different people. So we would welcome anyone to join with us on having those conversations and thinking of people that can help.
Thank you. And just to reassure you, Marcus, that the service has done some amazing work about raising awareness for fostering. As members of this council, you would have remembered a couple of full councils ago, we all had a pack on your seats, which I'm sure everyone took away and read intently and passed that message on. The idea of doing that was, of course, to keep the profile high. What we're looking is for how we can rebalance and reshape and redirect things, which is where the work, making our workforce aware and making our partners' workforces aware. In fact, it would be remiss of me if I didn't remind everyone that one of our fostering campaigns won awards for the way it worked. I think what we need to do is, please, when you go to your parish council meetings, wherever you go, remind people about the fostering. The more we can do it, the more that we keep awareness about that. So,
The specific question was how much money, because although a lot of work's gone in and the team's probably doing a lot, but we talk about limited resource a lot in this council. The question is I don't want to say how much money can we throw at it, because actually it's how much money can we invest in it as a council. I'm not expecting a question. I'm not expecting an answer from you.
Yeah, it's a kind of a rhetorical answer to your rhetorical question, really. But I just wanted to remind people, if you haven't made it clear before, but certainly the current government has got a very strong direction on supporting everybody in the country to find more foster carers, because you're right, it feels like a thankless task because we've been doing it for a long time and we've been improving things, but there's still this kind of slow decline in interest levels nationally. But there's we'll keep at it, not throwing good money after bad, but you say investing wisely. And thank you, Chair, for reminding everybody as well about how good some of these campaigns have been. And we have bucked some of the trend, but it's in small numbers.
Thank you. Okay, I've got Diego on my list for new members to speak. I'll let Francis come back very quickly, and then I'll look to move on members because we've got a full packed meeting. So Diego, thank you, and welcome to the meeting, by the way.
Thank you, Chair. Good to be back. Three things from me, if I may. The first one is all very good. There's clearly a lot of actions and process and things to be done above and beyond what's currently being done, which is great. But I'm only wondering, and recognising that we have temporary resources in terms of additional staff to be able to support and do that piece of work. But I'm also wondering around the longevity, and the transformation staff may change things in a couple of years time too. But can we be confident that there's enough innovation in the process and the way that we are doing things, or is there any innovation in the process, not just the process that you have mentioned, which is very, very heavy, to make it easier on the workloads of the staff that we do have, and also just conscious about the long-term trajectory as well. The other two things is just on the foster care and looking at staff. All really good. Clearly, we're raising, or the idea seems to be about raising awareness, telling people and encouraging people, or our workforce. My only question is I wonder how much of our workforce already know about it and may have considered it, but there are barriers to them. A lot of our workforce are under pressure at work, at home, and may not have the time and ability. I'm not saying there aren't people who will have time, but is there anything above and beyond, rather than just telling them and raising awareness, that we could be doing to incentivise that perhaps we're not doing? Maybe you're doing everything you can do, I don't know, but I'm just wondering on that point. And also, you may have done this, I'm just wondering, we've got a large elderly population in Somerset. Have we done anything around targeting retired folk in Somerset around fostering? If so, then just quickly yes. If not, then what else can be done? And my last one, it's been touched already by you, Chair, around the action plan and measuring. The detailed action plan which goes to Ofsted, I'd be really, really keen to see that as it goes to what goes to Ofsted, because I think it's really important for us as members to understand, particularly the baseline, what's expected, where we're going, because clearly this is a huge programme, never mind all the transformation side of stuff, but I think every member should be able to see that and challenge it if need be.
Okay, thank you. If I go through them one by one, so the demand versus sort of longevity, your first question. So, the purpose of putting it in short term is to allow the transformation work to happen, which primarily focuses on reducing the demand coming in and enabling more children to go home by intervening intervening much earlier. So that in itself, which we want to be successful, will lessen workloads because we'll be working differently with families and we will have less children in the system. So it's the transformation plan is evidence-based work we've done, listen to children and families. So we can only go with that being our aim to reduce that. So yes, we hope, more than hope, that's, we intend to make it work, but we just recognise that at the moment with caseloads as high as they are, trying to get people to do more, to think differently and work differently is just not there, which is why we need that extra short-term capacity. We said 2 years because we anticipate that will be the time it will take to get people into post, settle the system and do the work and get into a new place where we're working differently across that whole system with partners. Does that answer that one? Okay. Secondly, the one around fostering and barriers. So we are a fostering friendly employer. So already there are incentives around extra days leave to enable carers to attend meetings with children and be there. Quite a lot of staff, including a lot of us, didn't know that was there. So that is being reviewed at the moment around flexible working, leave. We're looking at a staff network to support staff who are carers and what they need from us as an employer and from each other. Peer support. And we're actually asking staff, we do have a number of staff that are either foster carers or kinship carers. So learning from them about what's the most helpful, even sometimes showing an interest in asking people how they are and how they can support is really important. So we are reviewing that. We're also obviously going to be working with the police and health. So again, what ideas come from that as well. With regards to the retired, yes, quite a lot of our carers are older carers, which is why we get a drop off every year, because it comes to a point in their life when they say, enough's enough for us, which is why we are also trying to target younger people as well. So we're having for a longer period of time. And certainly for the police, because a lot of the police do retire at 50, we feel that would be a really good target audience for us for around fostering and our children. So yes, we have do have a lot of older carers, but we're looking at how we try and incentivise to different age groups and what that looks like. So for younger people, one of the myths is you can't be in a rented accommodation in foster. Well, you can. You know, and how do we support families who might need a slightly bigger home to actually be able to achieve that, so they can provide more homes for children. So lots of different ways to try and incentivise it, thinking about the different parts of society and communities as well. And then the detailed action plan, yes, as soon as it's submitted and signed off and in that finished, ready, we will of course share that, and it will be a published document, and then you'll be able to see the milestones, tracking and the updates as it goes through.
Thank you, Francis. If you could
Just a very, very quick one, reassurance that that one of the columns on the plan will have dates by which due for everything.
It is on there, it just wasn't on the presentation.
thank.
Really quickly, I also
You're
want to give
asking
a
yourself
shout,
a
I just want
question.
to give a quick shout out as well, because as a council, we've just recently gotten a gold award for being a kinship employer, a really good employer for people doing kinship work. So just want to put that one as well as the fostering one. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, I don't think there are masses of recommendations there, but I sought. Let's see if we can go. So, oh, sorry, one more question. Sorry, where are the links with the corporate parenting board? Are we, because some of these are children looked after specific items, are we going to be reporting to them, please?
Yes, we will be. Yes.
Okay, so that helps a little bit with, because one of the points, the actions are largely sensible. The committee sought to be reassured about impact. How will we know they are working? By when? And what evidence will show that children's experiences are genuinely improving rather than processes simply changing? I suppose that's a statement more than anything else to sort of summarise what we can. Some of the points that I had, obviously, it's important that when the plan goes forward, that there are responsible people attached to it with, as Diego and other members put it, with KPIs and targets and dates. So that for us, I think as a committee is what is vital and important. Clarity over the reporting line, or more to the point, member oversight. You've got these bodies that are looking at it on a regular basis, but when will Scrutiny or executive get reports? Because I'm just conscious that today most of it is going to be, you need to look harder at this member oversight. I don't want to make work for this committee if it's going to be, or for other people, it's going to be reported somewhere else. So it's more a question as opposed to something that the members that we're looking at. We
So it'll be quarterly to the transformation group and 6 monthly here.
That's perfect, because that obviously with exceptions being escalated through but I think that'll go down as our one of our actions. Obviously, I support your call for accurate data. I think the committee has heard us talk about data and issues with partners not sharing the same thing over and over and over again. So one of our recommendations is that we support the need for accurate data and support you in that. The children's voice, as I said, I think that must be something that runs through the whole of the thing. And then the final one I've put down is obviously, which you've confirmed will happen, but as an action point of the Ofsted report and shared with members, so that members can. Are there any other points, members, that we needed to cover? We'll go over it. Obviously, I'm just conscious that this is going forward, so but we can clarify the points as we go forward when the minutes are publicised. Jane, thank you for that one. Okay, that's agenda item 6. Where are we? So it's 10 past. Are we happy to proceed, members? Do we need a different rate? Okay, agenda item 7 then. Inspiring innovation, my world, my tomorrow. Are you introducing that, Heather, and then?
I'll make a start. Thankfully, I have a cast of thousands behind me who'll come in with any of the details as we introduce it. I just wanted to again just to kind of tune us all back into the actual report in front of us. So this is a key part of the Inspiring Innovation Transformation Programme, established as a council-wide, large-scale transformation programme, of course. But we've been folding into that and into that rigor the transformation work that we as and as a directorate we're already looking at anyway, which is wonderful to be part of the whole thing. So My World, My Tomorrow, I always say this is a name thought of by the children. The children actually came up with the name, so that's, you know, we have to we do listen to them, but we also have to make sure we take on board what they say. So that's one of a tiny example of what we've been doing. So My World, My Tomorrow is part of the wider Inspiring Innovation Programme. It's been in alignment. It's developed in line with our children and young people's plan. So again, getting that child's voice in from more than 6,000 children in our children and young people's plan, trying to reflect what they're wanting in the transformation we're doing. It builds on 3 existing priorities within the Children's Transformation Plan, which is something we've been working on for a couple of years. So that is, and this encompasses the whole of children's services. So you have local mainstream school is right for most children, not all, but most children. Families can access support early, and that there are sufficient homes for children in our care. So that's the fundament of what we're trying to do. And what we're trying to do is then put this extra kind of level of activity and improvement on top of that. So My World, My Tomorrow is focused on transformation in social care, but it has to link closely with education and early help. It's designed to improve outcomes for children, young people and families, and also reduce escalation into care. So it's all that front end, trying to prevent things from happening, as well as doing the best we can with those children when they're in our care. We want to strengthen the family-based support, increase permanence, so people, you know, children aren't moving around, they have a permanent home, and improving placement stability. So you see, it touches on a lot of the things that we've talked about already on the Ofsted plan. So 4 work streams on this, which we've been massively supported and working alongside Newton on, are promoting excellent outcomes for children looked after, maximising internal fostering capacity, promoting excellent outcomes for children with their families, and getting the best value for money from the external market. So again, as well as my cast of thousands behind me, I know I saw there was Nikki Roberts as well on the call from Newton. There might be others, but I noticed Nikki earlier. So Newton is our council transformation partner. They've been working alongside us in children's services to give that specialist delivery and specialist capacity, but also expertise and independent challenge. That's really what we're looking for from Newton. So it's really important that we test that they're bringing that to us, which I'm sure they are, and building capacity, skills and knowledge so that they leave this lasting legacy. You saw it with my life, my future in adult services previously. It's the same kind of model entirely, where we work alongside with our experienced partners, but they enable us to be able to take the stabilizers off and run on our own without them there all the time, which is very important. So we're just trying to ensure, and Newton will help us to do this, that this is a very big and wide-ranging transformation that we're doing, and this is one large element of it to improve children's social care. I'm going to stop talking now because I've just really summarised what's at the front of the reports that you've got. I'm going to hand over, I think, again to, I think it's Jane this time, to declare. Who's getting this one? Henrietta, forgive me. See, there's so many. I only had one thing to do, and that's introduce somebody. I got the wrong person. I know Henrietta's doing something again later on as well. But Henrietta, I know, has been deeply involved in the business plan and has been presenting this in other forums as well. So I should have guessed that. So, sorry. Oh, and of course there's Nikki's just come onto the screen as well. So I did remember Nikki was there also. And Alan Jones is also in the room, and Claire. So I'm sure there's people who can answer your questions. I'll pass you over to Henrietta now. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members. I'm Henrietta Barkham, Service Director for Commissioning and Performance. So I will talk through the business case relatively briefly. I will go by page number so that you know where we're at, because we don't have a separate presentation for this. And then, as Heather outlined, either myself, Claire, Jane or Nikki on the screen will all be able to answer your questions. So first of all, My World, My Tomorrow really builds on a number of prior business cases as part of the Children's Services transformation that you will have heard about previously under Wave 1, specifically our existing work already underway around reunification, around fostering and kinship, and really expanding our kinship offer, and Jane already spoke about that earlier, around Room to Grow, which is helping foster carers increase the number of bedrooms to enable them to care for more children, and also working alongside our Families First proposals and Homes and Horizons, which you will be hearing about later as well. However, My World, My Tomorrow takes that really strategic overarching view and, as has already been outlined, is split into 4 initial work streams. Those are focused around promoting excellent outcomes for children looked after, maximising our internal fostering capacity, promoting excellent outcomes for children with their families, and getting the best value from the internal market. Together, these programmes, and I will just move us down to page 20 on the supplementary pack, that sets out a little bit more about some of the aims in those programmes, and those aims are of course also set out in further detail with milestones further down the business case. Come on to the case for change, which is, I know you'll all be quite familiar with some of the issues and challenges, but some of our data on page 19, you can see the increase in the number of contacts between May 2022 and February 2026. You can also see the increases in the rates of child protection plans started, the increase in numbers of children in need, the increase in numbers of children looked after, and indeed the caseloads. And again, you have heard quite extensively from Jane in the draft ILACS action plan of the impacts of some of those things and the actions that we're already planning to undertake. But all of the work under the My World, My Tomorrow business case really takes that strategic overarching approach for how we can do things differently across children's social care at every stage, from working differently and better with families before they even have the need to come into contact with children's social care, to getting the best value from homes for children looked after as well. So I'll come on to just talking briefly about the organisational risks that this business case will mitigate. And this is on pages 24 and 25. And the more detailed risks and mitigation are set out further down the report as well. But at a strategic level, this business case will help to mitigate our strategic risks around failure to deliver our statutory responsibilities in relation to children, families and education services. It will also contribute towards reducing the strategic risk around the medium-term financial sustainability. And while all of this transformation programme is very, very much focused on getting the best outcomes for children, that in turn helps us spend less money. The two really do go hand in hand. They are not in opposition to each other, because if we can get the best outcomes for children by being able to keep them safely in family-based care, whether that's their own families with kinship carers or indeed with foster carers, that in turn costs us less money than them going into very expensive residential placements, or indeed having to be placed in unregistered provision due to the lack of residential placements. And finally, the proposals also aid the mitigation of our children and families' risk around placement sufficiency. And that is, of course, a theme that was very much picked up on in our ILACS inspection. And you've heard already about some of the actions at a high level that we're taking to address that. We know we need to have an increase in the number of homes for children in care, but part of that wider sufficiency picture is also the earlier work that we've spoken about. If we can help reduce numbers of children coming into care and help keep children safely with their families, that in turn helps us ensure that we have sufficient accommodation and support to meet our children's needs. I'll now come on to measuring impact, which is on page 26. So the performance of the transformation programme will build on an existing strong set of dashboard and KPI measures and milestones, which are already reported on via the various governance boards, which are set out on a diagram further down the presentation on page 33. There are very specific measures with milestones associated with those. So all of that will be reported by individual work streams and then aggregated and reported to the relevant steering boards, and then feeding up through both the Inspiring Innovation governance and also the Children and Families governance. I will move down to page 33 just to show the governance diagrams. So at the bottom of page 33, you see the existing governance structure within Children and Families. And on the right-hand side is shown the governance there that relates to elected members. The proposed governance is at the top of page 34. And that then also includes the My World, My Tomorrow governance, which feeds up through the Children and Families Thematic Programme Board, the Inspiring Innovation Board, the subgroup of the Children and Families Board, and the member Inspiring Innovation Assurance Board. So just to bring my short overview to a close, the recommendation to executive, and sorry, I probably should have said at the start, this business case is going to executive this week on the 5th of August for approval. The recommendation to executive is to approve the proposed business case. And the request from Scrutiny today is for your comments and recommendations in relation to that to aid the executive with their decision. And I will pause there for questions.
Okay, members, thank you. I think you started, or Heather started by saying that this is massive. I don't think that's an understatement. And there are so many points that this covers. Being able to fully digest it and make records. I spent, I know my vice chair and I, different areas, different times, spent a lot of time going over this to go through. But just I'll start, members, if you can indicate for questions. So my vice chair, I'll start with the first one that I just wanted some clarification. Throughout this, it's this test and learn process that is talked about. So forgive me, I'll just paraphrase it in my head and then see. But could you explain more about test and learn to us, please? Because I know, I'm sure that it will be. There is some governance attached to that, but this is so someone in another authority. Newton has observed something happening that they thought was good. We would then potentially take that idea, run it in a small way, see whether it works, and then take a step back to before it's implemented. Is that the rationale? Or so test and learn, a little bit more detail, please.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'll kick off and then Jane will come in. So from a transformation model perspective, it is absolutely about designing ways of trying out doing things differently, and those ideas have been drawn very much from the service, so from experts in what we do within Somerset, working in partnership with our Newton colleagues. Because to really genuinely do things differently, lots of people have loads of ideas, but we don't know at that point exactly which of those will work in Somerset. Of course, we have certain evidence that we can draw on from national pilots, from evaluations and so on, but it's really, really important that we test those things out locally and that we don't try and import a potential new way of working or a model from elsewhere in the country that does not then work in Somerset. So the test and learn as a generic approach is very much about local experts working with our transformation partner Newton to design ways of doing something differently testing those and then iterating and developing. But I'm sure Jane will be able to give a bit more insight into what that looks like in practice.
I think the only thing that I would add is when we first started talking about it, everyone was talking about, shall we do a pilot? I think the problem with pilots is people get fed up with the term pilot. And actually, sometimes you say what you're going to do in a pilot and go all the way to the end and then say, oh no, let's not do that. Whereas the test and learn was meant to be iterative, in that you could try something out and then morph it, amend it. So by the time you get to the end of the test and learn, you've actually got a model that you then want to roll out and continue on a wider basis. So I think that's why that terminology has also been used here.
It sort of answers, because one of the points, I think one of the recommendations that the committee may want to make, and is about equality impact assessments, because obviously with test and learn, the equality impact assessments aren't there. So I'm assuming, so we test and learn. If it's a viable option, then that then goes forward with the associated equality impact assessments and business. And there's nodding, so that's
Yes,
good. Thank you.
That's correct, because a test and learn.
Go on.
A test and learn in itself isn't necessarily going to result in or it may not result in a long-term policy or service change, because it may be identified very early on that something doesn't work and it then changes. So you are absolutely right. The equality impact assessment would be done at the point of adoption and sustaining that new way of working, all that different.
Thank you. So I'll do one more question and I'll bring some members in. So how will executive know this programme is improving children's lives? Costs? What are the key outcome measures beyond financial benefits?
I'll kick off and then others may come in. So you will find on page 29 and 30 of the business case, some of those expected outcomes are very much around kind of measures and quantifiable measures, of course, as well. But by their nature, many, if not all of those, will also positively impact on children's outcomes. So, for example, increasing the number of children achieving permanence each month from an interim care order. By increasing permanence, that is giving children a better outcome, because it means they have a stable forever family, whatever that plan is. And also where that forever family, maybe with a kinship family, maybe with a special guardian, maybe back with their birth family, those things will also in turn save the council money compared to that child potentially moving into more expensive placement. And just to keep on that example, again, reducing the time taken to achieve permanence, that is then also delivering better outcomes for children through them not being in a kind of a limbo period of uncertainty for an extended period of time, not knowing what the longer term plan for them is. I'll pause there in case anyone wants to add anything.
Anyone else? Because the question, I suppose, is also saying, if we're doing this test and learn, how will we know that it's benefiting the young people? Are they going to be involved in that conversation?
Yes, they will be, as we always seek to get that feedback about if we're working slightly differently or considering doing something in a slightly different way. So yes, as we move through, so we're, part of the start of this test and learn is identifying children, for example, who we think could return home in a planned way with that extra support. What we know from previously, that some children going home is unsuccessful and they come back into our care, and we've looked at all of our learning from that, and sometimes that's around the length of time we put in that additional support. So the idea of having that reunification team is from that wave one business case is to support that family for a longer period of time. So when they have wobble, so we've listened to what they've said, when they first have an argument or the child maybe stays out later than they should do, rather than that ending up in a big issue in that child returning. So it's looking at what we know from our learning and what maybe we haven't had that capacity to do, to actually really think about, if children tell us this, if families tell us that, how are we going to respond to that? And then check out, has that made a difference this time by doing it slightly differently? And if it's not quite right, we'll keep going and keep trying and keep talking to them.
because it talks about stage gate reviews, doesn't it, throughout this, and that is those points, I think, is it? There's a hand up. Nikki, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I was just going to say on this one, I think that's the benefit of the test and learn process. So Henrietta mentioned there's a series of outcome measures that you can see in the business case. So it'll be things like reducing the number of children entering care, increasing the number of children achieving permanence outside of care, increasing the number of children that are able to step across from residential to a family-based care setting, for example. Now we've got milestones in there that says when we intend to have the kind of test and learns wrapped up. However, I don't think we would complete a test and learn until we can see some of those measures moving. So until we can see the rate of children stepping across from residential to family-based care setting upping by, I forget the target that we put on it, 15%, 20%. Until we can see that in our kind of smaller test and learn area, I don't think we'd proceed to the kind of county-wide rollout that comes from it. And if we can't see it moving, we've got the kind of support around those test and learns in terms of a design group made up of Somerset staff to say what we're going to try and do differently, what we're going to and keep iterating whatever it is that we're trying until we can start to see some of those measures change. So that was one point I was going to make, and then the other bit is because I'm conscious a lot of those measures are very kind of numerical, and we could very easily lose ourselves only looking at graphs and numbers and lines on PowerPoint slides over the next few months. So one of the things that we've been quite purposeful in doing is making sure in the governance, and I know Henrietta's already spoken about the kind of My World, My Tomorrow steering board that will then feed up into the kind of thematic board, into the Inspiring Innovation board, is making sure that our intention is every time we put a graph up there that talks about numbers of children coming into care or numbers of children stepping across, is to have stories of difference in there as well. The idea of that being we're bringing stories of actual children up into how we're talking about this and how we're reporting on it, not just the graphs and the numbers.
That's heartening because it goes back to the "you said we did" situation as well, doesn't it? To showing that evidence there. Thank you. Diego, please.
Thanks, Chair. The one thing I want to just ask about now is about the assumptions around the cashable savings and non-cashable savings as well. I have a feeling looking at this that there's not enough detail for me to see exactly where those assumptions have been made, how they are going to be measured, which work stream they're going to come from. There is some detail there, I appreciate it, but I don't think it's enough considering we've got something looking at potentially £45 million. It talks about 45 million, talks about 28 million over the medium term and financial strategy. I would much rather be looking at a quarter by quarter, which work stream are we looking at and how much cashable savings or non-cashable savings is meant to come from which element of this business case. And then year by year as well, a lot more details required. These are big numbers, Chairman, and I would much rather see a lot more detail so that we can obviously hold the team to account and make sure that we're delivering what's expected from the investment that's being put forward.
Thank you. And yes, like I said, I come to this, and I'm not the expert in the room, and you read them, and I've got a little bit more exposure than you would have, I'm sure. But I think what we have to get, we get the proof of the actual kind of business case to start with, the kind of shape of it, the test and learns, get them in there. Hopefully this will be approved on Wednesday with improvements from yourselves. But then because of its complexity, there will be a whole bunch of milestones, a whole bunch of timescales. We won't be waiting till 2030 to see how well we've done. We are going to have to be breaking that down ourselves, just in management terms, to ensure that we're keeping an eye on all of these things. There's one, I think, what we're coming to is sort of one singular, well, a kind of a singular set of values and changes we'd like to make to improve, to transform how we deal with children's services and how we support children so they have better outcomes. But there'll be a ruck of data underneath that and detail underneath that so that it doesn't slide away from us. There'll be many different plans that we're going to have to just keep an eye on and make sure we've got milestones. I don't want to take, I'm sure that's the way Nikki would be thinking about it, that you can't just have one single set of things that we only look at once a year. We're going to have to be looking at things on a more detailed basis because there are lots of elements. Every time you see a line in here, there's much detail behind it, some of which we don't yet know because we'll start in one direction, then may have to change direction. So I accept that, but I think at this point, until we start doing it, we can't say other than yes, we will be keeping an eye on it on more than a yearly basis. We can't yet say what's going to be in the quarterly returns.
And you'd be pleased to know, Diego, that I do have for one of our draft recommendations that financial benefits realisation is one of the indicators we were looking for. Alan, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. And just to support what Councillor Shearer has just said, I think one of the key issues that we'll need to kind of lean into very quickly if this business case is approved is effectively the development of the activity plan. So not simply a milestone plan that says we will have done this by then, we will have set up a new policy or a new activity or a new intervention. But the delivery plan should actually show us what's the intervention, is it working, is it having the desired effect, is it creating better outcomes, and importantly as well, is it also having an impact on the pressures that are in the budget and reducing that spend. I think we take the recommendation from Scrutiny in terms of the regular nature of reporting. I think it also speaks to the point about test and learn. So if we're seeing that a particular intervention or activity isn't delivering in the right way, essentially the work that we engage in with the Children's Transformation Programme supported by Newton effectively is being able to pivot quite quickly. So if test and learn is going in one direction and showing it's not working, the ability then to move quite quickly to another intervention. It's a very similar model of working that was in my life, my future, sorry, too many my's, my life, my future, in the sense that if something wasn't working, we had the flexibility and agility to move to something else that effectively did impact the metrics that you're seeing in this business case. But I think quarterly reporting in terms of progress would be really helpful just to see that trajectory and are we doing things in the right order and are they having the right impact. So thank you for the recommendation if that's what comes forward today.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to press on making sure that the committee is seeing every single bit of detail, because I think we need to have confidence that when you say, for example, we're going to save £1 million on X, that actually, how do I know that you've come up with that number? How is that 1 million? And by when are you going to save that 1 million? Is it in quarter 4 or whatever it is? And if you've not achieved it, then what are you going to do to change it? You've mentioned some of that already, but I think it's really imperative that we see that detail. £67 million being invested in this programme, Chair. It needs to have robust oversight from this committee too.
I can the financial benefits realisation is specifically to cover that point that I'm going to suggest as we go. Claire, you're waving at me.
So in terms of the in terms of the realisation of the financial benefits and the outcomes for children, some of the timescales are quite long. You're not going to see things on a quarterly basis because this is about people and people are unpredictable. And when it's about moving children to the right place, it's at the right time. And the right time may not be in quarter 1, or quarter 2, and there might be something that happens in their life that means it's in quarter 3 or in the forward year. So the overall programme has a sort of an overall amount that will be saved and the overall outcomes that will improve for children. But I can't guarantee that we'll be able to move children in particular months of the year because, as we all know, people are individual, and both they and the people they would move to live with, or the people they're going home to, might have difficulties, or it might be able to go faster for some reason. So we need to take that into account, which is why we've got an overarching sort of milestones rather than very short timescales.
No, I understand that. I think without wishing to put words into Diego's mouth, it's more about we're talking about £28.4 million cashable save in a period of time. If that period of time is 2 years, then that's still trackable, as opposed to being. Was that right, Diego?
Yeah, Chair, absolutely right. And also, it's just if we're telling members this is going to save us 28 million potentially, then we also want to be secure knowing that, not then being told, well, actually pressure could go up, so this figure may not be realised at all because children X, Y, Z. I appreciate all the pressures behind it, but we just need to have the confidence that it's deliverable.
Thank you. I feel your pain. I know where you're trying to get to with. Oh, I think I understand, because I feel a lot of questions I have very often with the service is about. So help me understand the modelling here. Help me understand what's the basis of your modelling and forecasting, and so there might be some way in which we can look at perhaps working through some examples. It'd say the reason we came up with these figures is because we went through this, this, and this, and thought of this, this, and this. That's what we're aiming for, because people like Nikki and the others at Newton do this like all day long. This is their bread and butter. This is their professionalism. This is what they're used to. Whereas I certainly am coming to it new. So I think perhaps some worked examples at some stage might be useful to say we got to that number because of this, this, and this. Now, whether or not it comes off, whether the timing is right, or whether we think actually we thought we could do X and Y on this particular thing, but now we think we have to do that, that's fine. But it's that assurance that we haven't just gone, it's this. It's not like a finger out there. Is that the kind of thing you were it's all part of the assurance you might be looking for?
Absolutely. I'm sure we'll, as this committee recognises the different levels of it, it's just a matter of where we would be able to visualise it, monitor it and hold you to account. This is going to be, we're going to be making recommendations to executive. It's going to be your product, but then it's how, and I didn't want to say, well, can you please report to scrutiny on a quarterly basis or whatever, because that's just making work for ourselves and duplication. Ruth.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is around the governance or proposed governance moving forward. So you've got obviously the two diagrams. You've got the current governance and the moving forward governance. However, I have significant concerns that the current governance, some of those boards don't actually exist and aren't in position at the moment, and it's been shown as a working document that that's where we are. So, for example, there is not a joint commissioning children's programme board, and yet it's on here as something that's relevant. So how confident can we be as a panel that this governance structure is the right structure and is ready to monitor this? Because it's been very clear in all of the reports that we're getting back from Ofsted that leadership is one of the areas that they want us to strengthen. If our governance is not right, then that's going to just continue to be an ongoing concern. So I just want some reassurance that actually all of these elements that are on this are in place. All of the partnership ones are actually definitely agreed by partners, because that's also been raised in other forums that some of these haven't been agreed by our partners. So I just want to make sure that the governance around this programme is strong and robust.
Thank you for that question, and I'll pick up on that point. And yes, I think you are absolutely right. That is a minor error in there, that the Joint Commissioning Children's Programme Board shouldn't be on there with that name, because we are still in discussion around what and how that might look like going forwards with the ICB following their clustering. I believe though that all the other boards do exist, so that one I will take as an option. So thank you.
Okay.
That work? Can you hear me? Okay, I've got an infection in my left ear. I've gone deaf that side, so that's why I've got the earphones in. Before I get to the question I was going to ask, I'd just like to follow up really on Ruth's, because I sensed when we were looking at the SEND reform plan that there's what's this echoing in my ear? Take them out. Can you still hear me? Okay. We were that interaction between Somerset Council and the NHS was absolutely crucial in this. There were issues on that about having additional support, experts at hand. Can I just double check that you are satisfied that there is going to be easy and robust and mutually supportive working with the NHS? Or if you were being really frank, would you say actually there's still some progress to make with regard to that? But can I deal with that firstly and then come back to my other questions?
Yeah, I think, thank you for the question. With the ICB having obviously undergone a huge amount of change in the last 6 to 12 months and still undergoing that change, there are still some areas to iron out. The senior leaders in the ICB have agreed the Children and Families Thematic Programme Board being the shared governance structure, and we have met as a group once already in that structure. The ICB did not attend that but sent apologies. I think there's some difference of view is sort of in the middle layer, shall we say, if you like, in the ICB. The Foundation Trust are very committed to the Thematic Programme Board, as are the police. So I feel like we have we have all the organisations absolutely committed to that and attending that board. I think there's some internal issues potentially in the ICB as things change from one manager to another.
Thanks, Claire. That's very frank. So what specifically do we, I mean, you as a team and we as a scrutiny committee need to be watching out for to make sure that we don't get tripped over because of things that the ICB isn't doing or is doing too late?
I don't think I'm concerned that the ICB is going to be doing things differently or too late. I think they are, as I say, engaged at a senior level. We need to make sure initially that they are actually attending that thematic programme board on a regular basis, which we can report to here. And obviously the actions will be multi-agency in terms of this programme and the SEND reform plan. And we need to be tracking in our own programme and also through these the corporate central transformation board that the multi-agency actions are being progressed in a timely manner, and obviously that's not being addressed as we would expect.
Sorry, I left it on. It's good that the hospitals are playing ball, but I suppose I'm more worried now than I was when we looked at the SEND reform plan. Can we make sure that we minute that this is an issue to pursue, and maybe we should add it to our list of concerns to report to the exec chair? Right. What was I really going to ask about? Yes, I thought, I mean, obviously there's a big overlap between the report you gave on the ILACS action plan and this change plan, because it's all about just improving performance. I say just, I shouldn't say just, it's about improving performance. So I like the stuff about the dip-in reviews, obviously right to be avoiding bringing children into care. The legal tracker sounded good. Just to double check, the 26 weeks is how long children are waiting for the courts to make a judgment. That's not within our control. Did I understand that correctly?
No, it's not necessarily in our control. That is the president's guidance on how it should be done. But clearly if a court wants extra assessments or reorders things or hearings get delayed or extra hearings put in, that will change that time frame, which isn't always in our control. We can submit things and put our view around delay. Sometimes we might need more time to do an assessment to find that independent social worker, but no, it's not within our gift. We are led by the court and what they instruct and what they want to see.
Yeah, no, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you. I'm a retired management consultant, so I would be reasonably confident in what Newton's doing, particularly having seen what they did in adult social care. And you know, I'm optimistic that the 28.4 million will be delivered. It's more difficult with children because children can move back and forth and change their view much more than adults in care, particularly if you compare looking after elderly people with looking after children. Elderly people mostly are not going to go back home after they've been into a care home, whereas with children, the reverse is the case. We want children to go back home if at all possible, and it's better for them too. So it is a different problem, but nimbleness seems to be at the heart of it. I think Alan used the word, we'll pivot when things change, and I quite like the test and learn. People used to say trial and error, didn't they? Test and learn is a lot better. But Claire's answer basically said, well, there can be slippage, so we just need to keep an eye on it all the time. We'll get the savings, but maybe they'll come. I think Diogo made the point, are they in quarter 3 or quarter 4, or do they fall into the next year? And that really matters. Just a specific question, workforce capacity. Staff have got their business as usual jobs to do. Newton takes as much of the load as it can on the change process, but obviously staff have to give some time to the change process. So 2 questions about that really. One, how do you help staff balance that capacity and not give too much attention to the change process at the expense of business as usual, and vice versa? And secondly, you mentioned stress, I think, Jane, earlier in your earlier presentation. So are there any indicators we can use to become early aware if staff are getting overstressed? I mean, I suspect there aren't, but it's just a point worth mentioning.
If I deal with that last question first, so clearly by having regular supervision and oversight by your manager, and touch points, that in itself creates those opportunities to both observe that member of staff and also talk to them. We clearly do have various things in the council to support staff if staff want to seek that out, but the important bit for us would be seeing our staff, spending
Jane,
time.
sorry, just to go to, I think because you turned your microphone, it's aiming to the speaker above your head. Take it square and it should be better,
that
I
better?
think.
Okay? No? That didn't happen before. Is that better now? Okay. So I think that's the importance of that relation. You know, our work is based on relationships with children and families. It's also based on the relationship we have with staff. So actually seeing our staff, them coming into the office, spending time together, being together as teams is really important, because that's how you pick up on how people are feeling and have that opportunity to reflect, as well as those things that the council have to try and relieve that. With regards to the capacity, yes, you're quite right. So for example, I now meet this time in my diary every week to meet with Newton, as there is for heads of service and people leading. So part of the business case and part of that investment is looking where we can put some backfill time in as well. What would help? Sometimes that's about business operations support to free staff up, but it's also recognising that we do need to balance that. What I would say is that staff want to make these changes. Staff, you know, in the work they do because they want to improve outcomes for children and do the best that they can. If we can get this more staff in on the ground, that capacity, that will enable managers then to step back up into their role at all the various levels, which does free people up then to focus on this strategic work. So there's a few different answers to that, but kind of all together, it kind of makes that work. But we do need to be really careful, because we know if we continue to ask staff to do more, that's not actually manageable, and we do need to help staff to balance that.
That's it's always down to people and behaviour, particularly at frontline manager level. But to hear that the staff want to make these changes, that's reassuring. Thank you.
Marcus, Councillor Cravis.
Speaker, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think I got stuck on the same paragraph as someone else for number 21. And although, again, I'm not too worried about quarterly reporting, because there's so many variables involved that, you know, and I understand what Claire was saying there, but I was quite interested in what happens if we don't meet the 28 million, because I was looking at the costings going to Newton. And of course, with so many variables, and I think we talked about the 26 weeks for courts, etc., which I think we've talked about before on several occasions. Of course, that could end up being longer. There's a lot of things that what is included in that figure, because there could be some things that are beyond our control, which are the courts, although I would say that politically they're within our control. We could maybe have a word with the government about it. It still seems amazing that I appreciate reports have to be done, but I'm sure the process could be speeded up, which would be a better outcome. What happens if that 28 million isn't saved, or is saved? I assume, is it likelihood to be spent on children's services anyway, because other things might have gone up? So I presume that 28 million is looking at specific things. I can't quite get my head around, I can't take all this in, of whether it's the whole budget, or then what happens if we don't get anywhere near it? What happens to Newton's fees then? Because obviously we've got to go out and argue the fact that for every pound we're saving, we're getting a rate of return between £4.06 and £4.74. Am I making sense? I think I'm making sense. Am I making sense at the back there? No, I never do I? So yeah, so one, what happens if we don't make it? What happens to the fee if we don't make it? And actually, how do we judge what that £28 million savings is actually from? Because it could be suddenly the judiciary do get back together. We could save a load of money there that wasn't expected. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I won't go anywhere near the professional side of children's. I'll just talk about the kind of contract and how that would work. So members will remember from previous decisions that were taken in February this year that essentially, and the original decision to appoint Newton, essentially we have the option of using a contingent fee model, which in essence is if those savings aren't delivered, it means that that Newton will continue to work with us, continue to ensure that we are looking at ways of delivery of that. Ultimately, essentially, breaks down as if it's not delivered, then that fee that we would pay Newton is at risk, and essentially we would either claim it back or wouldn't pay it. You can clearly see the significant risk for both Newton and the council as a result of that. Hence why there's such an amount of work gone into the modelling exercise, the baselining of the activity, but importantly that changes can be made to deliver the improved outcomes and the savings as part of it. So it is essentially at both the council's risk in investing as part of this, but more importantly and crucially as part of this procurement arrangement. Essentially, it's making sure that Newton are part of that are taking that risk as well as part of their approach to it. What it does mean though, and I think the 151's assessment of the council's finances is clear. If ultimately this doesn't deliver, whilst the fact that the council may be protected financially in terms of the outlay towards Newton colleagues, clearly it does create a significant hole in the budget, and other mitigations would have to be found in order to balance the books. But as again, the 151 has been clear in his assessment earlier this year, previous 151 in his assessment earlier this year, transformation is the answer to the long-term savings proposals that are required to balance the books. So it's finding a way through as part of this process. So in summary, contingent fee protects the authority. Ultimately, if this doesn't deliver, other savings would need to be found, either from the service or from across the council. But essentially, a detailed programme with good monitoring should give us some assurance of whether we're on track to deliver. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got a couple more questions. Francis, you weren't down on my list, Francis. Francis, come in, please.
I thought I'd caught your vice chair's eye. Beg your pardon. Yeah, I'm going back a bit. To how do we know about the children? What's the outcomes we want? I was very pleased to see that Nicky picked up in what he said, from page 34, a story of difference underneath the data. What's the story of a real child? So two things about the draft agenda for the steering board. One, how do we find the right children? How do we know that the stories that we're hearing, if we're looking at the individual stories, are actually what's happening rather than a particular story? It's got to be right for more than the one child, or it's got to be a challenge for more than the one child. So it's how do we find this? How do we know we're listening to the right stories? That's the first thing. And secondly, I wonder whether we would want, given the very helpful discussion about financial oversight, it would be a good thing for the draft agenda for the steering board, not just to have overview of financial impact, but just something perhaps something slightly clearer for its thinking, to help its thinking. Those were my two questions.
Thank you for the questions. I'll pick up on the how do we know the stories of difference are the right stories first. I think where we are working through the test and learns currently, there's always a balance, I think, in children's services between some of the kind of astronomical financial figures that we see and the savings that we are seeking to deliver against the fact that some of the numbers of children are actually really quite small. And the way I foresee us seeing those stories of difference and telling those stories is around that very individual work with children. And as Claire alluded to earlier, it is about those individual decisions around what is best for that child at that point in time. So at the moment, for example, one of the test and learns working in South Somerset is looking at moving children in a really planned way from residential care into foster care, which of course will deliver savings. But in terms of capturing that child's voice and what difference that has made, that is done on a very individual level. And indeed, we've had kind of individual feedback from the people around those children, from their workers, from the providers, etc., already commenting on the difference that very planned and painstaking work has made. Don't know whether.
I suppose one of the questions that I was going to ask to continue on with that, so it's about financial insurance going forward. Are we? Is it going to be all of these going to be signed off? I'm assuming by Director of Children's Service, by Director of Children's Services and Finance, so that so that we're aligned. There's nodding out, so just for the record, there's nodding, so thank you. Francis?
Absolutely, we need to know about those very individual cases of, well, and they are, of course they are. But as Claire has said, or if she didn't say this time, it's in her thinking, children aren't parcels. I also think we ought to hear about the stories of those children who didn't come into care, who didn't escalate, who didn't get that, because the vast numbers of our children who are helped early enough not to get there will avoid both the cost that we then have to mitigate and try to move and so on, but it will also avoid them being damaged in the first place.
Francis, I think that was one of the points that Nikki made earlier, is we need to make sure that the successes of this are as part of the reporting as well. Okay, just because I think I've covered all the points I needed to, but one of the ones that I had down here now is about placement sufficiency. I think we've talked about that going forward, and we understand the direction there, but what's plan B? If
I can kick that answer off. I think the plan is rightly on many different elements. There is no one single bullet to solve sufficiency. It is a really, really complex area, and there are many national challenges, and what we are experiencing in Somerset is not completely, an outlier from those national challenges. I think, as I mentioned earlier, part of our work around sufficiency is actually all of the strands of this My World, My Tomorrow business case, including the earlier work to prevent children from coming into care, all of the actions that Jane talked through under the earlier agenda item around our response to the ILACS inspection, and I think the opportunities that we have as part of our regional working going forwards in terms of how we develop and change how we as a local authority work differently with other authorities in the region to really strengthen our sufficiency across the region, and move towards a place where we are, as I think Jane mentioned earlier, less likely to lose the right home for a child because a neighbouring authority will kind of pay £2,000 a week more for it, or whatever figure. So I think there is, and again, this is a national piece of work around changing that culture and also those ways of working between between local authorities, whether that is through the formal mechanisms of regional care cooperatives or indeed our existing regional working through the South West Children's Alliance.
thank you. Okay, I'm just going to, Diego.
Just very quick, just process, just out, because it may be in here, but I may have missed it. The potential cashable benefits, is that built into the MTFP once the executive agree, or at what point is whatever's going to be saved built into the MTFP?
There is a table 2 which explains some bits, particularly on the larger element of saving, which is around external placements, which bits are already in the MTFP. I want to say what page I want to say 37, but I don't think it is. It's oh yes, yes it is. Is it? No, yes it is. Yeah. No, it's not. No, I've lost it again. Hang on. I think it might be. Yes, sorry, that's it. Yeah, table 2, page 37, and it has the first line, because it confused me when I had to get clarification on this one. The first 2 lines are essentially saying external placements which are cashable financial benefits. Then the next one is really essentially saying, but these ones are already in the MTFP, which is line 2. So line 3 is where you get the kind of the net figure. So yes, I think as we're reporting things, we are reporting what isn't in the MTFP already.
Okay, thank you. Right then, members. So I'm just conscious that I wasn't inundated with recommendations, so I've been preemptively trying to get things going. So in the chat, magically there are 8 recommendations that we may want to consider. I've got a sort of a covering comment. You should be able to get in through your Teams. Okay, I'm not in the Teams. Yeah, please. we're just cut and pasting. So I'm just conscious this is going to executive on Wednesday. So I'd like us to do, and they may not be perfect. So what we'll do, we'll make sure we share them with members so that we can cover them. I think it's covered the points that we wanted to do, but I've sort of got a statement ready to go to executive. So it's along the lines of members support the ambition to improve outcomes for children and families, Somerset children and families. However, given the scale of investment, the risk identified within the business case, and the importance of safeguarding vulnerable children, Scrutiny believes that continued oversight, transparent reporting, and robust assurance arrangements are essential as the programme progresses. And then supported with these recommendations. The first one being that I'll let you read them, because otherwise my eyes are going to give in.
I think there's 8 recommendations on the document. So are people happy that I move down the page? So that's recommendations 3 and 4. And I'll move down to 5 and 6. And then I'll move down to 7 and 8. Sorry, just we can come back with any queries.
Just going to say, and thank you for bringing this, pulling this all together so quickly and having a look at those. I mean, there isn't anything in there that's kind of scaring us. Some things we would already be doing anyway, we'd like to think, and other things that, yeah, as you've brought a little bit more light to it. So I don't, obviously we'll look at it properly all together, and we'll consider them. We'll consider it on Wednesday. But yeah, certainly nothing's worrying us so far.
Okay, so Francis put her hand up and Marcus put his hand up. So Francis.
That a workforce impact and capacity plan be implemented before full implementation. Speaking people, but it isn't full implementation. It's lots of test and learns. So I'm not quite sure how that works.
So that's referencing that fact that we can't have oversight of test and learns that are taking place. If they decide to bring them forward as a substantive proposal, then we need to make sure that all the relevant documentation is in place before it's implemented, including equality impact assessments.
Exactly. I think probably the reality of the way we are working and having to work rightly through the business planning processes, we can't really move forward with things until we can evidence that. And certainly we are working hand in glove with our finance partners and HR indeed to make sure that what we say we're going to do a thing, we know what the full impact is. So in that regard, it doesn't worry me, except that because I think we have to do that in an iterative way all the way through anyway.
I know, absolutely, and the important point to remember, members, is that we're making recommendations to executive. At the executive, then it gives officers the opportunity to respond to those points as well, which is where Marcus.
Yeah, I was only going to say yes. I mean, if we're going to take one block, I'm still unsure on the quarterly reporting and what you're asking for. Might be half of them I can't quite understand anyway. But I say my concern is that at scrutiny we could.
It doesn't say to scrutiny, Marcus. That one, number 3.
No, but what I'm saying is that scrutiny we could ask for it at any time. And I suppose, and that's why I'm thinking, are we then suddenly giving a load more work when actually what we should be doing is dealing with outcomes?
I don't think when we had that conversation a moment ago, a quarterly response was something that was supported by the officers. Again, let's be clear. We're making recommendations to executive. So if they don't like it when it gets to them, then they can come back and. There you go.
Could you scroll to number 2, I think, please? In number 2, be made available to scrutiny. Not saying you have to debate it, but the information and the piece of work they do is available to members. It's not explicit there.
Suppose the only thing I'd say is we wouldn't have got the business plan to this stage if it was not underwritten or validated by the DCS and our finance of at this level, at the level you're seeing now. The fact that it's here means it has been validated by those two parties. As things come forward, again, nothing will come forward unless it is validated by those two people. How much of the work and doubt you need to see.
Thank you. So just to be clear, that's why I made the point of asking the question specifically of Claire and making sure that anything, and just to reassure you, Diego, that goes through so decisions like that will go through our decision-making process. So the necessary people would need to be included in the, yeah. If it's, yeah, our decision-making process is clear that this committee is one of the, well, I'm the chair of the committee, the appropriate opposition lead and members, so would be part of the decision-making process for key decisions. That's right, isn't it? Yeah. I'm just conscious of time, members. I wanted to try and get that up so that we could at least have something that we go through. I will try. I'm trying my very best to reorganise things to be at executive to make the point with the statement I made, the comment I made in the. But obviously, the executive members are here for that. Any other points in this item? Okay, 10-minute adjournment then. So it is just after 10, but it's 12 minutes past. So if we could do 10 minutes, and then that would be really good, and we'll get underway again. Meeting adjourned. Thank you. Eight of our agenda. We can do it as we go. Item 8 of our agenda, but before we do so, I need to take a motion by virtue of going into private session for, and and just for clarity, the reason we're going into private session is because potentially there's information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information, may be disclosed to be incorrect. It's proposed by Councillor Clayton. Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Stanton. Thank you very much. All those in favour, please show. All those against, carried unanimously. Thank you very much.